I'm Cindy Briggs, and this is Soldier's Heart. When I was a senior in high school, considering my options after graduation, college was the only possibility I considered. Joining the military was never even on the short list. Back then, if you'd asked me why not, I would have given some convoluted answer that made me feel important, adult. Some pretty words about my peaceful nature and abhorrence of war. I was really into John Lennon and favored all black outfits to pair with my fledgling social activism. Join the military? No way. Even though my father was in the ROTC in college and the Army after, and my grandfather served in the Army during World War II, the military was nowhere on my radar. Looking back from this vantage point of 30 years, now I can tell you the truth. I was utterly terrified at the idea of joining the military. I knew I didn't have it in me. I had neither the physical nor mental stamina to succeed in such an environment. I didn't do well with rules or crowds or conformity or cafeteria food. In the darkest corners of my mind, I pictured myself on the first night of boot camp, curled up in one corner of my mattress, stifling my tears as I cried myself to sleep and prayed to God for deliverance. It was fear that kept me from the recruiter's office. Nothing more, nothing less. For the young men and women who faced enlistment or the draft in those early years of the war, fear was their companion too. Fear along with hope, excitement, patriotism, anger. The emotions of late adolescence run deep.
I'll pick it up when I was 17 at the beginning of 1944. The news, of course, was full of the war in Europe and the ocean war in the Pacific. And they were talking very much about an invasion of Europe. And here I'm about to be 18 and about to be drafted. So I said, no way for me, Jose. So I decided I would enlist in the Navy. And I did. And so that happened. I enlisted in the Navy. And just before I enlisted, by mistake, I learned, by happenstance, I learned that I had a red-green color deficiency in my eyes. Nothing you would know except you look at the book with the circles, the little colored dots and the circles. Okay, but I found that out. I'll pick that up in a minute. So enlisting in the Navy, I was told to come to New York City on July 5th, 1944, where I would meet with some other unfortunates like me and meet with a Navy person, and we all took the Pennsylvania Railroad down to Bainbridge, Maryland. Okay? And that's where I was processed for 10 weeks there. Now, when you first get there, they send you through a physical. And I was very conscious of my red-green color deficiency. And I said, I wonder, will they refuse to take me? Will they put me in the Army? I was really upset. So what I did was, it's amazing. It's amazing. Even today, it's amazing to me. So they lined us up the second day, a big hall, naked men, towels around their waists and going through all of the motions. And then we came to the eye test. And it's a long table with books on it and people behind it. And I'm in line and I can see the books. And they were testing for color blindness at that time. And so I listened carefully, and listening to the answers that the people in front of me gave to the examiners when they pointed at a book and a circle. I memorized each of the circles in each of the books, like that. And so when I got up there, it was my turn, I just reeled it off from memory. That was an amazing feat. But I was so intent on staying in the Navy, so I passed the test.
Okay, a friend of mine, we were living in High Point, and we came to Winston to join the Air Force. And the quota, that met quota, and so we couldn't get into the Air Force. And about halfway back to High Point, he or I don't know which one, said, let's join the Marines. And we turned around in the middle of the highway and came back to Winston and got papers for the Marines. And I went through the country. I grew up, my dad and mother still lived down at Midway. So we went from Winston down there and got Mom and Dad to sign my papers. And like a fool, as soon as we got in High Point, I dropped it in a drop box. We went down to his house, and his mother and dad wouldn't sign for him. So I went in with a gang from Wilkesboro, bootleggers. And they were great guys, but they had been around, and I hadn't. I mean, I was just a kid. But we got down to Raleigh to sign in, and so these guys, they were pretty high. They had their white liquor, and I got into a corner, and I stayed by myself.
Yeah, when I turned 18, I received a draft notice from the U.S. Army. They wanted me in the Army, so I had to go and take a physical in New Haven, Connecticut. So we all got on a train from New London and went to New Haven. And when I was there, I was standing in line to go to Fort Devens in Massachusetts for the Army. And two men came along, one from the Coast Guard and one from the Navy. And they said they needed 12 volunteers for the Coast Guard, 12 volunteers for the Navy. And they were going to go alphabetical, calling names. And the first 12 took the Coast Guard. I said, well. So I wasn't thinking anything about it. And then they called my name for the Navy. Yeah. And I put my hand up and I said, Navy. So that's how I got in. And I went across the street to be signed in. And once I signed in, the commander took us for a steak dinner. Said you didn't have to show up again for another 30 days. And we were looking out the window waving to all these guys going off into the Army. They were all mad at us.
I was in the Army. I served all my time in the Central Pacific area. I was in as a staff sergeant, but came out as a tech sergeant. I was going to University of Richmond, and I got drafted and went down for my physical. There was 15 of us, and we took our physicals on the campus of Virginia Union, which was a Negro black college. Well, 15 of us, we passed our physicals. We had to wait to see what was going to happen. So we were sitting in this room, and we looked around, there was 12 guys wearing green tickets, 3 of us was with red tickets. And we looked at each other and said, hey, maybe we got deferred, I don't know. But this buck sergeant came in, he said, you guys with the green tickets, come with me. So that left us 3. And we sat there all afternoon. I said, what's going to happen? Finally, the guy came back, and he says, there's a van out there, get in that van. I'm going to take you for a long ride. We went down to Petersburg Turnpike in Petersburg, Virginia, went to Camp Lee. And I spent 3 days there, and they says, you'll find out what you're going to be doing. So the 3rd day, we looked on the bulletin board, and there was my name, Camp Chaffee, Arkansas. Helping out a troop train, we went to Camp Chaffee, Arkansas, which is right out of Fort Smith, Arkansas. And I was in the 2nd Armored Division.
I had 3 brothers in. My oldest brother was in the Air Force. He was killed in the war. My next brother was in Africa. My second brother then was in England, in the Army. So they all said, whatever you do, get into the Navy, because it's just you really want to be in a place where you'll have a bed at night and you'll know where you are with clean sheets and everything like that. So don't be a fool, get into the Army or something like that and be in the mud. So I said I'd like to be in the Navy, so that's why I went into the Navy. My brother Jimmy went through Germany. He was a captain in the artillery, and he landed. And his hardest thing was he went to at least 5 of the prisoner of war camps. And he was the first man to walk through the gate and release them. And he said that was the most horrible things he'd ever seen in his life. He'd never forget it. And all those soldiers, looked like they were about 85 or 90-pound people.
Ben, how did you end up in the Navy?
Oh, I volunteered. Well, actually, I was drafted, and as soon as I come out of high school, I became 18 in 43, and they sent me down to be examined, and the guys said we need infantrymen, and everybody they was putting in the infantry, and I said I'd do better in the Navy.
What made
So he
you?
pulled my name out and put it up there as the Navy.
What made you think that?
Well, I had a friend that was in the Navy, and I didn't want to sleep in foxhole. I wanted a place to sleep. And as long as the ship's floating, you got a good place to sleep and good food.
In all the battles I've been in, I was real lucky. I carried a St. Christopher medal with me, and I still have it. There it is right there.
Wow.
My mother gave me that when I went into service.
And is that the same one?
That's the same one.
Wow.
Yep. Same St. Christopher medal.
We had, when I finished up my training at Camp Hood, Texas, we went on a forced march at night for 20 miles with a full field pack. And I mean, that was rough. And if you couldn't make it, you fell out in the ditch there and waited until somebody picked you up later at night. Oh, that was rough. And I weighed about 110 pounds, or 115 at the most. So I didn't gain any weight doing that. I made it. It was difficult, but I was a little stronger than most of my size. So I'm still not a whole lot bigger than that. Anyway, we got through that, and that was one of the things that was required to show that we were prepared to leave the training and go into combat somewhere in the world. You become a friend when you're in a situation like that, because your life depends on how your friend sometimes handles himself. And the training center, Camp Hood, Texas, was a very good one. So we got better than average training there, which I'm very grateful for. You fight because you have to. A lot of times you make mistakes and you try to correct it because no one has to tell you made a mistake. But should know well enough in your better judgment that you got to do it differently. There's so many little things that happen along the way. But anyway, we took a bus from Raleigh down to Paris Island, and so we started out, and I was in a platoon of 61 men. I was the one sticking out on the rear. A platoon of men was 60 men. There were 6 squads. And so I was hung out on the very end. So they always put the tall men in the front. Well, in the behind, you can't keep up. I mean, I know my DI, I was just racking them up as rear march, and I was skipping and trying to catch up. So the DI, drill instructor, said, Weevil, said, you remind me of a monkey trying to catch a football. So he got me out by myself and said, let's see if you can march. So, it's no problem to stay in step with nobody but yourself. And but he put up with me and got me through.
Then we went down to Bainbridge, Maryland, and the first day there, they gave us pointers on what to do, what not to do. We had a tough petty officer, chief petty officer, and he laid down the law for us. And that night, lights out, it was funny but not funny. Some of the young men who had never been away from home, you could hear the sobbing. They were so scared, taken away from home for the first time. But we got through the 10 weeks okay.
They were drafted 18-year-olds. So I went down and signed in on my 18th birthday.
Oh, wow.
And they took it all, and they said, we'll call you in about a week or two. Mm-hmm. And are you familiar with which group you might want to be in? I said, I'd like to have the Air Force. Mm-hmm. They said, well, we can't promise it to you, but when we call you, if there's an opening in the Air Force, we'll try to get you in it. So when I went back, I got into the Air Force. I took my basic training at Wichita Falls, Texas. And then after we finished our deal there, they shipped us to Harlingen, Texas, as a gunnery school. And we went through gunnery school. And that was a long, drawn-out affair. And we had to learn to take the 50 caliber machine gun apart blindfolded and put it back together blindfolded. And if it didn't fire, you'd get kicked out. So.
Well, it was a lot of physical stuff. I mean, a lot of marching and a lot of following orders. You had to scrub your own clothes and make your own beds and do all kinds of very good discipline there, I must say. Guard duty every now and then. It was a lot of discipline. I think we all learned discipline. You grew up in a hurry, yeah. You learned how to say yes, sir, and so forth. Take care and do things right, Yeah, you grew up pretty fast because you were in a mixture of people from everywhere, all over the country. So you learned all the different cultures and how to deal and live with people. And there's some strange people you run into. I was on, later on, of course, I'll mention I was on a ship and copying code, and I ran into this fellow from Appalachia who was a radioman, old-time radioman in the Navy, you know, and he could sit and copy code, chat with you. He'd be copying, listening to the code, and then he would simply say, well, wait a minute, I got to put it down. And then he would type it out. He had it in his head. He could carry on a conversation. He also never liked to wear shoes, so he sat there barefoot doing all that. But he was a great guy, yeah, but a genius.
Yeah, I grew up rough and tough. I mean, you know, they treated you just like they did everybody else. Just because you was 18 years old didn't make any difference. You'd stop a bullet just like anybody else. Most of us farm boys were tough. I mean, I remember in our training, you know, particularly we have those, what they call a 25-mile force march. Now that's pretty hefty. You didn't do it the first day you got in camp. Well, I could have, but those guys from New Jersey couldn't, I'll tell you that. But we'd have a force march, a 25-mile force march. And then they'd start out with an ambulance behind us. And first thing you know, that ambulance would take off. And here would come a 2.5, we'd wind up with a 2.5-ton truck picking up the dropouts. And I'll never forget the first 25 force march I was on. There's a bunch of us old country boys. I can see Snuffy Smith right now. He was our colonel. But I remember we came in, I can see him now standing out there outside his office on a stoop. He's standing there like that with that sullen face on. And when we approached him, we started, let's see, what was that song? Left, right, left. Can't stay here, we left, right, left. And we went by singing that. And I think it made him mad because he thought we ought to be dragged. Not really. But now some of them were in the ambulance. But most old country boys, after a 25-mile march, we'd come in singing. That was just fun for us. I'd followed a mule 25 miles of many a day, plowing corn and tobacco. But the Army wasn't too tough on me. I was already rough and tough from a physical standpoint. Now, naturally, we all 18-year-old boy get homesick. I saw my 19th birthday in the jungles in New Guinea.
Thank you to the veterans who shared their stories for this chapter. Alan Peterson, Navy. Jimmy Weevil, Marine Corps. Jack Desley, Navy. Mike Filippelli, Army. Buddy Robinson, Navy. Ben Bost, Navy. Lauren Ashley, Army. J.B. Caldwell, Army Air Corps. And Corbett Walters, Army. Soldier's Heart is written and produced by me, Cindy Briggs, and features veteran stories from North Carolina. We honor vets by listening to their stories. You can follow along on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Soldier's Heart NC. If you have an idea for a story or interview, email us at soldiersheartnc@gmail.com. Special thanks to the Winston-Salem Muse of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, where all these stories are archived. You can learn more about the museum at musews.org. That's musews.org.